Hello everyone, welcome to another research project talk by me, Dr. Paul Rose. And this is going to be a talk aimed at those of you towards the end of your research project, when you've collected your data, written it up, submitted, and now you're thinking about what to do with the findings and data that you've worked so hard to collect. Do you want to publish it, write it up as a peer-reviewed paper, and disseminate your results as widely as possible? So what I'm going to talk about in this video are some basic background tips to publishing, key information on the publishing journey, as well as dealing with the challenges and opportunities that come with scientific publication and engaging with the publication process. We'll think about how to choose a journal, how to publish your science in that journal, and how to work your way through the potential pitfalls, areas of further consideration, and the things that you might be unfamiliar with if you've never published in an academic journal before. I think a really good starting point is to remember the difference between your thesis that you've completed for your MSc and the actual papers that you might write from it. A thesis or dissertation is going to contain a lot of information. It might have a much longer word limit than you would write for a published article. Similarly, some scientific articles might be very niche or specific in the content that they will cover. So you should distill down the information presented in your final written report for your course to what actually goes into an article that you'll then eventually publish. So all of the information that is contained within your thesis is excellent for you achieving the requirements of your university course, but not all of it might be needed for an eventual scientific article. And in fact, if you have a range of hypotheses, a range of aims, and a really big data set, you might end up publishing more than one paper from your university research project. So let's start off by thinking about key points for consideration when you've handed in, you've submitted, you have your grade, you've done your viva, and you'd now like to do something with your project. It's really important to wait to the end of the process until your MSc is completed, and then talk to your supervisory team, keep in touch with them, and think about where could your science go, who is interested in it, and what journal is the best fit for your project. And the best way to think about that is to look at the aims of the journals available to you. Do they match your study's focus? Is the readership of that journal someone that you want to engage with and tell them all about what you have done in your research? So think about your intended audience. What might they look like? Who are they likely to be? And are they going to be interested to know more in your area of research? Think about creativity in the author guidelines of the journal as well. Do they allow you to do a graphical abstract? Do they allow you to have figures, tables, illustrations, things that's not just text-based? If you've got complex results across many different variables, and these are best explained in figures and diagrams, do you have a decent number allowed for the write-up for that journal? If you have complex results that require lots of graphs or tables, maybe choose a publication that has flexibility in the number of illustrations, figures and tables, for example, that you can have. Remember that journals have defined limits on how long articles will be, because they're going to put together several articles into an additional volume. So it's really, really important to stick to the author guidelines, to not overwrite your article, to not use too many words. Concise and succinct is better. It will convince the editor of the journal that you're a credible and experienced scientist. Also think about how your audience will access your article. Will it be an open access paper, which is brilliant because so many more people can read it, but can sometimes come with financial challenges? Or will it be free for you to publish, but be provided behind a paywall for subscribers to that particular journal? There are pros and cons to both, and you should discuss open access or subscription papers with your supervisory team. When you write your cover letter, which is something that we generally have to do for all articles that we submit, try to advertise what you have done alongside the scope and aims of the journal. Clearly tell the editor, this is what I've done, this is what I have found, this is why it's novel, and this is why it fits in with the outcomes, the aims, and the outlook of the chosen journal, of the editor's journal that you are writing for. Again, please work with your supervisory team to think about cover letters, what information and examples you need to include in that cover letter to convince an editor of the relevance and importance of your research. Some journals will often produce special editions on a theme or topic. For example, in the animal behaviour world, there might be particular special editions on the behaviour of taxonomic groups or on certain types of behaviour, for example, social behaviour, or maybe on new methods of measuring behaviour, for example, the use of automated technology. So do check out special editions within established journals, because you might find a perfect fit to the question that you have been asking. These special editions are generally highlighted on the Twitter pages, the website or Facebook pages or other social media outlets of the journals themselves. So do keep checking where is being advertised, what is being advertised, and which journals themselves are open to special editions, because some publications run more of these than others. Some special editions are really specific, and this means you might find yourself being able to write for a more general journal that's suddenly doing a very specific special edition on exactly your topic. This can increase your readership, because writing for a more general journal is one where the audience is going to be looking across a broader range of topics. And special editions in these more generic or more general journals might allow you, as the more niche scientist with your specific question, into something with a really wide readership. So it's worthwhile considering what special editions are out there, when do they open and close, and what are the requirements for writing for that special edition. So you have talked to your supervisors, you've decided on where you're going to publish, and you've thought about how you're going to approach the writing up of your paper. It's worthwhile thinking about how long it takes for scientific studies to become available in the literature. This has moved on in leaps and bounds over a number of years, and articles do now appear more quickly than they used to, particularly with the advent of early view articles that are yet to go into a volume or edition. Basically, the time frame for journal articles to appear is down to the editorial and review process. Scientific publishing is reliant on academic peer reviewers to assess the quality and validity of articles that are published. We are all only human, with busy lives and jobs and other things that take up our time. So the process of academic peer review is based on the speed to which reviewers can handle those papers, provide feedback on them, and then the author of the paper actioning the feedback. So bear that in mind for your timeline of publication. It certainly might not be something that you're thinking about when you're writing up your thesis for your university course, but if you want to publish it and you want it to remain novel, and you don't want somebody else to do it and publish it before you, it's never too early to consider, how long will it take me to write this up and get this out there? Of course, you're not going to know in advance how many reviewer comments you're going to get and the scale of them, but it's certainly worthwhile looking on journal websites to see the turnaround time of papers. In some journals, this can be quite short, perhaps a month to 6 weeks. More commonly is a couple of months, potentially sometimes up to 9 months, or maybe a year for papers that go backwards and forwards for many different revisions. Please be wary of journals where publication speed seems too good to be true. If you look on journal websites and you see a paper was, let's say, submitted in October, revised in November, and published in December in the space of a couple of weeks, and you look to see the quality of the paper, the quality of the writing, and the repeatability of the paper, think to yourself, just how thorough has that peer review process been? Publishing work quickly of a poor quality is not good for your academic career. Engage with the peer review process thoroughly and choose reputable, non-predatory journals, those that have a high scientific standing and are recognised in the field, and choose those types of publication to distribute your work into. Many of the scientific journals that have been established for a number of years will have an impact factor. And lots of people set a lot of merit and precedent on impact. But it's not the be-all and end-all when it comes to choosing a paper. Impact simply means how many people have read and used your work. But the use of your research by the audience that you are aiming for, by industry professionals, for example, also matters. So think about your audience and who you would like to engage with your research, rather than simply basing it on a journal's high impact factor. Yes, impact factors can matter. Certainly if you want to go down the PhD route and become an established academic, we are expected to publish in high impact journals. But if you have applied science, applied outputs, you want to reach an audience that's going to use your work, that's going to use your findings. So temper any reliance on high impact with the audience that will actually engage with what you are writing. Impact factors are calculated across a couple of years of publication, normally between 2 and 5. And it's a relatively straightforward calculation. You take your article, you look at the number of times it's been cited, and you divide that by all of the citable articles that are available in that same time period. There's a difference between impact factors of self-citation, where you use it in your own work, and citation by others. It's important to not do too much self-citation of your own work in other future papers that you are writing, because you must show a depth and breadth of coverage of the wider literature. Yes, you can use your own work, but you must use your own work alongside of other people's science too. The scope of a journal and its general readership will have an impact on any eventual impact factor. If we take Nature and Science, for example, those really top tier, high impact journals, they will have a really high impact for their articles because they have a general readership. If we take more niche and very specialised publications, for example, one that I'm very familiar with, which is zoobiology, it has a lower impact factor, but that doesn't mean it's bad science. It doesn't mean it's a poor quality journal. It means its readership is much more specific. So if I was writing a paper on environmental enrichment for captive animals, and I wanted to convince zookeepers on the importance of environmental enrichment, I would write for zoobiology. They will be familiar with the journal. They're more likely to read it. If I wanted to write a paper on the benefits of zoos to human society, education about conservation and sustainability, I'd write for Nature or Science, because those are broad, general, societal terms benefiting a wider audience. So think about the scope of your research, think about who's going to be interested, and decide on your journal accordingly. So as I just said, please don't choose your publication simply on impact. The most interested audience for this research are going to be those that are working in your field and potentially using your results to support their own research. So my very flippant example here of a paper on environmental enrichment for unicorns and how enrichment improves unicorn welfare is going to be very, very specific to unicorn keepers. And I don't imagine there are very many of those around in the world. So any lower impact journal that focuses on unicorns and enrichment and welfare is going to really reach my audience. It's going to really speak to them because I've written for them. I've written for their field. So don't hide papers away in a high impact general audience journal because it might not get to the people that will actually use it. It's better to write for the industry standard. It's better to write for the publication that you know is used, and therefore your science will be disseminated and be applicable much more widely. The next hurdle to get over when you're deciding where to publish and what journal to choose is whether or not it will be behind a paywall, subscription only, but free for you to publish in, or will it be open access? And open access journals will charge you as the author for the privilege of publishing in them. These charges can be a couple of £100, up to £1,000, or sometimes multiple thousands of pounds. Some institutions will have agreements with open access publishers to cover these article processing charges, sometimes called APCs. So check with your supervisors, who can check higher up the food chain of the university or college to see if there are any standing agreements or relationships between the university and the publisher that will allow you to publish open access, but at no cost. These APCs can be prohibitively expensive, and I would not encourage people to be paying for them from their own money. Think about ways around article processing charges, maybe by writing for special editions that come with waivers for free papers, maybe talking to the editor of the journal and explaining that you are a student with limited funding. Particularly if you have received no funding for your work, can the journal waiver those fees? And again, talk to your supervisor to see if your university or college or organisation has any relationship with the journal that also allows you to publish for free. Ultimately, open access publication dramatically increases the readership of your work. So if we can publish open access, it's good, but don't panic about it if you can't. There are many excellent top quality subscription journals out there. Be very wary of high publication costs for predatory journals, those that you might find getting emails from. They might have long and convoluted titles. They might address you strangely in the email by giving you an academic title that you don't yet have. If you get a phishing email from a predatory journal that looks too good to be true, check it with your supervisory team. It is damaging to your own career to publish in predatory journals. They're not well respected. They might not have a stringent and valid, reliable peer review process, and that might damage your reputation and standing in the future. Again, check with other academics, check with your supervisors, and ask them about the best types and names of journal that you should be publishing in and you should be working with. Once you have your paper together, you follow the author guidelines of the journal, and these are generally excellent and very comprehensive. And in fact, following author guidelines is now much easier than it used to be, because lots of journals have a your paper, your way policy for your first initial submission. That means you simply write without crazy formatting and specific requirements until you get accepted, and then you might have to do formatting changes. This has dramatically speeded up the publication process. But one of the things you are likely to have to do is to write a covering letter. And my top tip for impressing a journal with your covering letter is to write it to the editor or editors in charge. Google name of journal and editor. For example, Applied Animal Behaviour Science, editor, to find out who is managing and in charge of that journal. It's much more impressive, makes a better impression to write Dear Professor So-and-so rather than To whom this may concern or Dear Sir or Madam. It shows you've put the extra effort in to finding out more about the paper. State clearly the title and focus of your paper in the first paragraph and explain why you believe it should be submitted and published in that journal. You must advertise the relevance and impact of your science. So tell the editor why it's novel, why they should read it, why others will want to read it, why it's going to enhance the standing of the journal, make the journal more interesting to others, and therefore why it's the best place for that article to go. Please don't forget collaboration. Please mention that you're writing on behalf of all authors, if you are, and make sure that you never publish or engage with a journal without the full consent of everybody involved in that research. Don't steam ahead with writing or steam ahead with doing revisions if you submitted without consulting your other authors. That's unethical, not valid, and it makes you an uncooperative scientist. Bring everybody along with you in the publishing journey. Always be polite and professional with your dealings with editors in your covering letter. If you know their name, Dear Professor Smith, you would sign it off yours sincerely. If you're writing to somebody more generic because there is no named editor, so you would have to start To whom this may concern, you end it with yours faithfully. So remember, be polite, professional, and follow the generally accepted rules of letter writing. Again, your supervisory team will be able to help you with crafting a good cover letter. Try not to go over more than one side of A4. The editor does not want to read everything about the paper, just enough to explain why it's useful to them and why it should go in their journal. So ultimately, when you have decided that you would like to publish, and you've spoken to your supervisor and other invested parties, and you've got permission to publish, think about the ethics, validity, and repeatability of your study. Keep the scientific method at the back of your mind. Can somebody else repeat what you have done from the information that you have provided? Don't cut corners, don't leave out detail, don't present results that aren't there, and don't give conclusions that you really want to have rather than the conclusion that you've actually got. Avoid any significance fishing, that's multiple and constant analyses after analyses of the same data until you get a p-value that you really want. Don't make out general trends in your data to be more than they are. If something is non-significant, it's non-significant. Don't try to fudge that relationship. Think about extensions and research opportunities in your discussion. Be open and honest about limitations, but couch them, present them as opportunities for further study. And make sure you have drafts read. Check with your supervisors, check with other interested parties, get feedback along the way, and always, always, always write to the author guidelines. Remember that journals will get many more submissions of potential articles than what they can actually publish. So any excuse to not accept a paper because it's addressed wrongly, because it doesn't follow the author guidelines, because it's not in the scope of the journal, because it's poor quality and not well written, is making an editor's life easier to reject your paper. Following the author guidelines is a clear step to eventual and successful publication. Of course, it's not straightforward that once you have submitted, even if you have done anything right, that your paper will eventually get accepted and published. Desk rejects from the editor themselves are very common, simply because of the volume of papers that they are processing. Desk rejects are commonest if your aims and scope of your article do not fit the aims and scope of the journal and the papers that the journal commonly publishes. So remember, there are many more papers getting rejected than published. Don't take that personally, and don't think it's a reflection of your quality as a scientist. Unfortunately, it can be down to a numbers game. When you do go through the process and the editor does send out your paper for review, remember that reviewers can be brutal. I am not saying this is the right thing for them to be, but I'm warning you in advance. Build some resilience, take a deep breath, and remember, they might not understand your science. And also, the typed message, the typed word, can be misconstrued because we don't have that face-to-face contact or conversation to see what people really mean. So take a deep breath, don't bite back, don't be flippant or sarcastic. Be professional and polite in your responses. Short, concise explanations to reviewer comments are better than long-winded, rambling and wordy statements that could add further confusion. But make sure your short and concise statements are polite, friendly and professional. You must reply to every comment you get from a reviewer, even if you think it's unreasonable. You don't have to action every reviewer comment or suggested edit if you don't agree with them, so long as you can say why you don't agree and why you think you were right in the first place. But again, you must be polite and professional. So please do argue your points, defend your science and stand up for yourself. But this is not a slanging match. It's not an excuse for rudeness. Even if the reviewer has been blunt and brutal in their comments, take the moral high ground, be the bigger person, and respond to them in the way that you would like to be spoken to. Again, work with your supervisors, work with other experienced academics. Don't stress or panic about reviewer comments. Work with the people around you that have helped you with the paper to craft the most appropriate responses to the reviewers. I hope this has given you a useful explanation of the key points of scientific publishing. Yes, it can be challenging. Yes, you might find yourself reaching for the odd gin and tonic or four. Did I say that out loud? And yes, sometimes you might get a bit exasperated. But the thrill and joy of having your first papers out there is really, really tantamount to success. So keep at it. Don't work by yourself. Collaborate with others. Seek advice. Know where to publish. Be an open, credible and valid scientist. Make sure you present your paper in a repeatable manner. Don't fudge your results. Tell an honest story and work with all of your supervisors and stakeholders, and publishing will be much more successful. So good luck and happy writing.